in the world of the frontline people, the genuine frontline people, the combat troops in life, you'll find very little sentimentality about their life. In fact, they are not even aware that their life is romantic. And also another thing, too, that is so odd about it, you don't hear much griping either. There is a strange acceptance of the frontline status. There is an acceptance of the wind. I remember one time sitting in a bus. There's a funny little scene here. Sitting in a bus, and a whole bunch of guys. We were going in, and I had been put on an open hearth, what they call a tapping gang. Now, an open hearth tapping gang is exactly what it sounds like. These are guys that work on the floor, and they're part of a tapping crew. Now there's a really distinct hierarchy in open hearts. You know, when you see these guys working down on the floor, you see movies of them in the movies of the steel mill, and you just see they all look like workers, but they're not workers any more than if you see 50 soldiers walking around. There are sergeants, there are corporals, there are BAR men, there are signal men. Yet, to the untrained eye, they all look the same. They're soldiers. They got the tin hat. Well, on the open hearth floor, there's a very strong division of responsibility and work and slavery and all the rest of it. And each man has a tag on him. Well, I'm sitting in the bus, and I've been assigned to this crew. My first night on the open hearth, I think I've ever told this story. I had gone through the open hearth a couple of times as a messenger, just run through, and it was a very I suppose you can say an abstract thing, and it was exciting to me to go there because I was going out of it. I'd go through and I would run out, and I would be on my way to the cold strip. Then I would leave the cold strip and I'd be on my way to the hot strip or the 40-inch plate or 40-inch soaking pits or any one of the great mills inside the mill. A steel mill is not a steel mill, I must say that, too. It's not just a place. It's not just a steel mill. It's a million little industries, all put in a gigantic, unbelievable melange, a cacophony, a hodgepodge, a gallimaufry, a fantastic fruitcake. And there are guys who are looked up to by other guys that you would never believe. You see down there at the end of a long, dark, steamy, hot, rotten, stinky corridor, you see a little metal pillbox that is covered with oil and grease and crud and dust, smoke of the ages. And in that little pillbox, there is a little tiny isinglass window that you can barely see through it. Just a little yellow light. And in there you see a guy hunched over a grimy desk, and he's wearing a corduroy hat and a sheepskin coat, and he's got next to him an old crummy wind-up telephone, and he sits in there and he's checking little checks, little cards that are handed in to him through the slot. He checks them off against a great big list. Then he puts them on a spindle, and every 5 minutes a guy comes and takes his little cards away, and he sits there. Well, down at the end of that corridor, way down at the other end from him, there are guys who think that guy has the greatest job in the world. This guy has made it. Oh, yeah. And then, oddly enough, as each guy at the end of that corridor, below him, down in the dank depths of the 40-inch soaking pit, there are guys wearing asbestos shoes who are lowered into the bowels of hell for 5 minutes, where they breathe nothing but the fumes of sulfur and the bowels of the earth exploding. They look up at these other guys walking around on the surface. Oh, God, if I ever get a top job. A top job is a job meaning you don't have to go in the pit. That's all. And the pit is the pit. Oh, boy. And so here I'm sitting in the bus, and I have gotten what they call an extra day. Now, when you're a free-floating laborer, that's a protean laborer. And a lot of guys in the various offices, whenever their mill was down or something, they would be given a pass. Like it's a kind of a pass. It's like getting a pass to take you into any theater on Broadway, something like that. Only you can only stand. You see, you have to stand back by the orange stand. Well, we would be given a pass that would meant that we could go to any mill we wanted to if we were out of work these 3 or 4 days when our mill was being repaired, and just go there and ask the labor foreman if he would give us a day. Well, this is my first attempt at this, And I have been working in the tin mill now for a while, and it's pretty calm. And one day they decided they were going to put in a lot of electrical pots, and our mill was going to be closed down for 2 weeks. So, yeah, gee, wow, boy, exciting. You know that exciting feeling you have when you're cast adrift from something that you've been sort of secure in? You're scared at first, but you're also excited. You're really excited. And so old Shep is riding down through the mill, and I go to these various labor bosses in there, and I go up to the guy, first at the coal strip. Now, I knew him, see, and I go in there, and I says, Joe Myers. And I says, Joe, how about picking up a day? He says, 10 minutes ago, I could have put you on, kid. 10 minutes ago. Sorry, kid. He says, listen, why don't you go see old man Hubbard? I said, Hubbard, you mean the open hearth? Yeah, go see old man Hubbard on the open hearth floor. They got a lot of snap jobs down there. So I go down to see old man Hubbard, and Hubbard is sitting in there wearing a derby. And he's in this little wooden cage, and he's smoking a black cigar. He's got a vest on. There are certain kinds of guys that wear black vests with white shirts that are open with no collar. You know, the kind of shirts that usually have collars. And he's sitting in there with his shiny pants, and he's eating a salami sandwich. And I go in to see old man Hubbard, and I say, hey, Hubbard, Mr. Hubbard, how about picking up a day? And he looks at me. He says, 4 to 12? And I say, I don't care. He said, okay, midnight. You come on midnight. He said, listen, I'll tell you what you do. Go down and see Jimmy. Go down and see Jimmy. Give him your check. Go on. We'll pick up a couple of days. I'll put you on the floor. I thought, well, floor, you know. I thought, well, you know, I'll stand around down there for 8 hours. It's going to be fun. And so that night, I arrived about something like quarter after 11. I was due in at midnight. I was kind of excited. This is the first time I was ever actually being plugged into the gap, you know. And in a sense, it's like guys that are looking at battles from a distance all the time. Once in a while, they send him up, and he brings some equipment up, and he rushes back. Well, you know, it's a very interesting thing to have somebody hand you a helmet, and they give you a helmet, and they give you a rifle or a BAR, and they say, all right, Charlie, here's your hole. Now, there are guys on the other side there, and if they start coming through, holler, duck, and wait. And just keep down low, you know. That's different. You're not going to go back. So I'm looking out there, and I'm riding the bus through the night. And it's a summertime because that's the time the tin mill goes down. Believe it or not, that's the time you'd think the tin mill would boom in the summer. It doesn't. It goes down in the summer. So we're going through the night, and the windows are open on the bus, and it's a real mill town bus going through Indiana Harbor and East Chicago, and we're on our way to the mill. There's a whole bunch of guys sitting in there, and they're all sprawled out. And I noticed most of them have the open hearth badge on. Now, the open hearth badge was a dark green badge, which had always seemed to me one of the scariest of all the badges in the mill. And it's a big green one that tags on. It's got the guy's picture, and it's an open hearth. Now, the tin mill had a light baby blue badge. It's just a kind of nice one. And the white ones were the office workers. That was a nice one, you know. They had a bright red one, which meant you worked in the 2AC. I remember all those codes, but that dark green badge was a badge, you know. And it was always worn by guys who just sort of sprawled when they sat. And they were wide. And they had these black overalls that were just crud and grease ground right into them. Did I ever tell you about the night that the poor guy... Oh, boy, I shouldn't tell you these stories. But one night... All right, I'll drop this one in talking about overalls. Whenever I see guys wearing overalls and Levi's, it scares me. Because one night I remember a guy who was on the coal strip floor wearing a pair of overalls. And all the guys in the mill wore certain types of overalls. And they were they were made by Big Yank and Levi. And they were dark blue denim, the regular overall type overalls. Some of them had the stripe in them, but I remember this guy was wearing the dark blue ones. Well, this night, suddenly, without any warning, there was a lot of yelling and screaming out on the floor. I happened to have just come into the weighing scales office, and I heard a lot of yelling, and I turned on the steam and went out and looked down the floor. And I saw a fire, a strange kind of burning fire that was moving. Now, these mills are huge. I can't tell you. Have you ever looked up to the ceiling of Penn Station, how everything sort of fades off into the darkness, great arching beams? Well, if you turn down the lights in Penn Station like maybe 200%, and then line the floor of Penn Station with burning pits and hissing, steaming holes and various machines that moved in the dark, you'd have a fair approximation of one of the big mills. It's very difficult. The vision is not good. And way down at the end, maybe 200 yards from me, I saw this fire. and it was moving. It was a strange moving fire, and everybody was sort of converging on it. And I looked for a second, and then the fire stopped and went down and began to move along the ground. Well, I hate to tell you what had happened. Is this man had come to work that evening about an hour before in his clean overalls that his wife had mistakenly and innocently sent off to some place where they cleaned them in naphtha. I do not have to tell you the end of the story. You know the end of the story. And so there were millions of little tragedies like that constantly going on. The strange things of that nature. Just boom, surrealistic. A man burning in his naphtha overalls, his new big Yank overalls. Well, so here I am. I'm looking at this. I'm sitting in the bus that night, and we're all sitting. Of course, I had all the standard equipment of all the what they call the floor or the labor force. All the labor force is given a certain set of equipment. Among them, an inhalator. You're given a gas mask. You get this down at the stores. You have your steel helmet. It was a kind of a plastic helmet that's lined with little steel staves inside, a little white helmet. You're also given safety shoes and both white and dark blue goggles. And then they had a special open hearth black glass, which was used for looking in open hearth or walking past open hearth charging cars. Now, we're getting very technical here, but we all had this equipment. And so I was told to wear my heat equipment. Now, the heat equipment, of course, was a standard kind of set of equipment, including the dark glasses, the big black, almost like welder's glasses. And heat equipment means that underneath your overalls, you wear the thickest kind of wool, dark, absolutely thick, insulated wool sweatshirts. These are sweatshirts that are worn to keep heat out of you, keep it away from you. Instead of keep it in, it keeps it away from you. As a matter of fact, your body temperature of 98 is greasy kid stuff to certain areas on the open hearth floor. So I'm sitting there, it's night, and I'm going through the summer night on my way to the first night in the open hearth, and I'm wearing my heat equipment. I feel like I'm going to the front lines, you know. I got my tin hat with me, and I got my lunch bucket, and all around me are these old veterans with their green tags sitting there. And, you don't know. Nobody knows anybody. This idea of camaraderie at work is kind of overblown, but there it was. And so I finally arrived at the clock house, the number 2 clock house. I get in the open hearth bus, which was a long open bus. You know, oddly enough, in the mill, in Inland Steel, they did use the buses that had been bought from the World's Fair. There was a certain kind of a bus that was a big open promenade kind of bus. It was like a sightseeing bus with big open windows, built by Greyhound, that they used in the big Chicago World's Fair. Well, the mill had bought all these things, painted them steel mill black, and had put on the top of each one open hearth or tin mill or a plate mill. And these buses would just move on past. You just jump on them. You didn't pay or anything. It was inside the mill, you know. It was a real working bus. And you'd jump on this bus and hang on to it. And, of course, the bus had seen nothing but World's Fair and Whoopiesville for years. And now there was nothing but a whole bunch of steel workers sitting there spitting and yelling and hollering. And they're on their way out to the big old number 2 open hearth bank, which stretched as far as the eye could see, reaching out into that black night that hung over Lake Michigan. It was built on a peninsula. And you could see that glow getting brighter and brighter and brighter until finally we pulled up at the what they call the labor dock. They don't even have doors, you know, in the state. It's the labor dock. And so I had been instructed to come off at the number 3 labor dock. And so at the number 3 labor dock, there's this great crowd of guys are all moving in. Great crowd, all wearing helmets, wearing their inhalators and stuff, all moving in. And there's a crowd moving out on the other side, getting on the bus that's going back to the clock house. That's the shift we're relieving. Well, they pull us into the dock, and there they are. They're lining up the labor groups, and they're saying, all right, all you guys, hey, I got up with my little tag, I got my tag. He said, all right, you fall in with that crowd over there. All right, all you guys that are moving down to number 17 through number 22, follow Fred. 17 to number 22 open hearth, and I start moving down with my crowd, and I am in. Oh, boy. I can see those charging cars moving up and down and back and forth, up and down and back and forth. They're moving. and she's moving back and forth and charging that furnace, and we're moving on down towards the number 17 open hearth, which is at least a mile away from where we were, and we're moving along that wall, and we could see all the various crews peeling off one after the other, moving into their areas, until finally we get down to the number 17, and everybody's taking some salt pills, and we go to work. Well, what did we do that night? It's hard for me to tell you. It's difficult to say what a working man or a laboring man in the open hearth actually does in big industry. But I'll tell you what our job was, the little crew that I was in. Our job was to load into great swinging pails, sort of like a giant Sandy Andy, with shovels. We loaded into these pails a combination of manganese, silicon, and carbon. We would have big piles of carbon, and they would tell me 2 shovels of carbon into each one that goes past you. And so these big clanking iron monsters would roar past me in the dark, and I go, wah, shunk, wah, shunk, big scoop shovel, and I got this black carbon in front of me. And then wah, shunk, wah, shunk, gung, 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 gung. It moves past, wah, shunk, wah, shunk, and pretty soon I got no more carbon, and all the carbon, and down comes a truck. They dump another pile of carbon in front of me. Well, it's funny. After about half an hour of this, I felt like Victor McLaughlin. The movies of Victor McLaughlin when he was a sand hog, or when he's down in the bowels of a great ocean liner and they're shoveling coal into this, and I'm shoveling away down. Well, we went like that for roughly, I'd say, 2 hours and 20 minutes. And I began to feel something funny down in the pit of my stomach. I began to feel something beginning to work, a kind of a gurgling down there. Something was beginning to work on me. And I'm I continue for about 10 minutes without warning. I cannot tell you what I was hit by. You know that cold sweat you hear about? A cold sweat hit me, and I'm heaving. And the big bowhunk next to me says, "Take a salt tablet, you nut. Take a salt tablet." Into the mouth, and I continue to shovel all night long. I was one of the men.